We have a facility down here, a unit down here, where we'll pull the plastic down. The gloves to work with here. We'll attach and seal a biohazard bag around the bottom. Then we have with these gloves a port we can open on the inside and actually pull everything through there. So these birds right here have no contact with the outside. Everything's passed through a port.
Biosecurity on commercial poultry farms.
Well, we just left the research facility where you could see that the level of biosecurity was quite significant, very high level of security. And I'd like to make a couple comments now on the type of biosecurity that you would have if you visited a commercial poultry farm. I guess first of all I can state that there is no generic biosecurity program. Every company, almost every farm you visit will have some of their own program, their own unique features. These companies will vary from basically little to no biosecurity to what I can describe as extreme biosecurity, and in some cases similar to what you saw in this research facility. Just a couple common points about biosecurity. When you want to enter a commercial poultry farm, these are actually, some of these are points that actually I require of myself before I enter a farm. Is I want to be sure that if I'm going to a commercial farm that I've not been around other poultry for at least 3 days prior to visiting a commercial farm, that I don't have contact with pet birds, contact with backyard chickens or wild birds for at least 3 days prior to visiting the farm. After I arrive at a farm, I'll try to park my vehicle at a good distance from the poultry houses themselves. We don't want to drive just close up to the poultry farm because there's a chance the vehicle could be contaminated. When we arrive at the farm, we'd like to require people, or I require myself anyway, to wear clean coveralls. I have a set of coveralls for each farm that I visit. Also, I have disposable boots, plastic booties that I put over my shoes, gloves, and when I get to enter the farm, I'd like to also use a foot bath. But the foot baths I think are very important because it allows you to break basically the cycle of disease. If your shoes are contaminated with some diseases, some of these organisms can live for weeks to months. So this is just one way to cover up your shoes, cover up your clothing. If you wear gloves, cover up your skin, and then use the foot bath prior to actually entering the commercial farm. Within the commercial farms, it's also very important that they design them so that they're wild bird proof. The wild birds are not able to enter the facility, and basically we try to make sure that there's no uninvited guests. In other words, anybody that wants to enter the farm has to be authorized. They need to check these people out to see where they've been, what they've been doing, so they don't go from one farm to another. For example, like a salesperson, go from one farm to another throughout the day and spread disease. So these are some of the very basic biosecurity practices. As I mentioned, there's no generic program, and I can say I've been to companies both within the U.S. and throughout the world where basically you can enter without any questions, without any biosecurity. And then other companies you enter where the showers, even 2 showers, coveralls, masks, gloves, fumigation, everything is done both for vehicles and for the people entering. So it's quite variable.
Poultry biosecurity in the United States.
We don't have a lot of these bad diseases because our government has a strong monitoring program. If we get some of these diseases, the government will spend a lot of money to eradicate. We're talking tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars to eradicate some of these diseases. A lot of these diseases are endemic in other countries which don't have the ability to eliminate them. When you travel from place to place, I noticed that the level of biosecurity, the disease challenge or risk will vary. For example, if you go to an island like Jamaica or Dominican Republic, the level of disease challenge is typically lower because of the physical separation, and therefore they tend to have less biosecurity enforcement in their programs. Go to other areas, like for example in Central America, where there's a lot of small countries, a lot of small poultry companies close together, a lot of movement of birds. A lot of people in those countries have small flocks, have chickens that run around the house, both within the house and around the house. These countries have much higher levels of biosecurity because, once again, the risk is higher. So I guess a lot of it comes down to risk assessment, how much potential of it, how high is the risk for disease challenge. A lot has to do with also the tolerance for disease. In the U.S. we have a fairly low tolerance for disease. In other countries they have a very high tolerance, and they deal with diseases not so much by trying to keep the disease out of the farms, but by using lots of vaccinations to try to reduce the effects of the diseases. So there's no one program. It varies dramatically everywhere you go. And I know when I visit different companies throughout the world, basically I look at what type of setup they have, how much disease challenge they have, and you have to try to get an idea of how much disease they're willing to live with or to accept in their program. And this varies greatly. A lot has to do even with culture. In some cultures, there's different levels of disease that people will accept. In the U.S. here, we have a very low tolerance for disease. Our consumers of our products don't like to have products that have meat from animals that have had diseases or have had any kind of lesions. In other countries, they don't seem to mind as much. So once again, it has to do with culture and the lifestyle of the people, the government regulations, how strictly they're enforced, and so on. In the U.S., we probably have some of the highest level of inspection for our meat products. Therefore, we really can't deal with having a disease and recovery. We have to prevent the disease. In other countries, they pretty much, in many cases, don't have very much inspection of their products, and pretty much anything they produce is passed on to the consumer. So once again, this also varies. In the U.S., we have very strong, very high levels of inspection. In other countries, for example, like Russia, they have very high levels of inspection according to their regulations, but the regulations are not enforced at all. In other countries, they don't have regulations, so it varies.
Poultry diseases in the United States.
As far as eradication goes, within the U.S., we have a tolerance for certain diseases that we accept and we vaccinate for all animal species and even humans. There are certain diseases that we consider to be exotic, which means they don't exist in the United States. When these diseases do enter the United States, an effort is made to actually eradicate them. Now, by eradication, this refers to a process where usually the federal government, through the USDA, through the Veterinary Services Division of the USDA, will come in and actually test and actually destroy animals that have this so-called exotic disease.
In this picture, USDA veterinary medical officers examine a white leghorn chicken for tissue reaction to a new Newcastle vaccine.
This process works because if a farm has a disease and the government inspectors, regulators find the disease and they kill the animals, the U.S. government will reimburse or indemnify the poultry farmers. So there's really little desire on the part of the farmers to hide that they have a disease. In other countries, the governments don't have the money or are not willing to pay the producers. Therefore, if they have diseases, they'll try to actually hide the disease from the government and try to get the birds to market, as many as they can alive. And of course, when you have this type of situation, the disease continues to spread and eventually becomes endemic. And at some point, many of these governments will actually just accept the fact that this new disease will become part of the normal disease picture and allow permanent vaccination. In the U.S., we have certain diseases we permit, but in general, there's several diseases such as the hot Newcastle disease, the highly virulent, high pathogenic influenza disease. If these diseases come in, we do set up programs to eradicate them, no questions asked.